I'll give you one very specific example on this. There's a company that shall not go named that the CEO of which pinged me and basically said, "Hey, Sahil, really great news. We just raised a fresh round of funding, and we're going to scale aggressively into what was at that time last year. So it was just like September, October of last year. So we're going to scale aggressively." Okay, great. Congratulations, awesome, obviously. Can you help us with some sales hiring? I was like, sure. What are you looking for? Person's like, I don't care about the compensation. I just need the best salespeople. And I was like, okay, well, what do you mean by best salespeople? I need people who can crush quota, who can close deals, who can just make shit happen. Like I need like hunters, people who I can put big targets in front. And so I'm listening to the description of what this mythical creature looks like, and I'm like, and I said back to him, I was like, you have no idea what your sales process actually looks like, do you?
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. Now, that was Sahil Mansuri. Sahil is the CEO of Bravado, a community for sales professionals. And in our conversation today, we talk about the 2022 Bravado State of Sales Compensation Guide. There are a lot of interesting findings from that study that we dig into. For example, we discuss why only 47% of sales teams hit quota in 2021. We dig into the reasons why only 1 in 4 sales teams had 75% or more of their members hit quota. So think about that. Only 1 in 4 sales teams had more than 75% of their members hit quota. Generally, poor sales performance. And Sahil and I also explore the whole topic of job tenure in technology sales. Bravado's study found job tenure is on the decline among AEs and senior sales leadership. When we speculate about why this trend is happening right now, is it the Great Resignation or perhaps something else? So we get into all of this and much, much more. But before we get to Sahil, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could also give us your feedback about how we're doing in the form of a review. So thank you for that. All right, let's jump into it.
Sahil, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me. I missed you.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, likewise. It's we had a great conversation last time. Look forward to it again this time. So, and it wasn't that long ago, actually. I was thinking about it. It was right after your daughter was born. She's what, 15 months old, you said now? So,
Yeah, that's right. So I think it probably about a year ago, I would guess,
yeah,
somewhere in that range. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, I think we'd actually had to reschedule it because the original date was like right around the day she was born, as it
That's
turned
right.
out.
That's right. She decided that I was not going to do this show
She had to
on
preempt
time
it.
last time.
Well, the little ones put their stamp on the world pretty quickly. So, well, so folks who maybe aren't familiar with Bravado, tell us a little bit about Bravado and what you do.
Yeah, Bravado is a community platform for salespeople. Um, we have about 150,000 odd members, all of whom are in B2B sales, with a real focus on B2B tech sales, I would say.
Okay. All right.
So the majority of our members come from companies like Salesforce and Uber, Slack, Dropbox,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera. Just like small, tiny startups you've never
Yeah,
heard
yeah.
of.
I haven't heard of any of
And
those. Yes.
yeah, that's right. And with the idea that it's a platform that can help salespeople be more successful in their careers, as well as to do better with their customers.
Got it. Okay. So a question I have is, there's seems like a sort of growing number of sales communities.
Mhm.
Do do people belong to multiple communities? I mean, sort of, or is there focuses of each of these different communities so that, a seller looking at, I won't name your competitors necessarily, but looking at the various options, say, well, which one's for me?
First of all, when I started Bravado, there were 0 sales communities,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the fact that there is a Rev Genius, the fact that there is a Pavilion, the fact that there is a Sales Hacker, and all these other things that are out there makes me super happy
Yeah.
because I started Bravado because there was nowhere for a salesperson to turn to communicate with their peers and get answers to questions. The original premise of Bravado was super simple. Sales at its core is like four actions, right? You prospect, you demo, you close deals, and then you retain customers. That's effectively sales. Sure, there's nuance to it, but that's generally the four pillars of sales.
Yeah,
And
I reduce it to two: acquire and retain.
acquire and retain. That's right.
Okay.
Although we specialized away some of the acquisition part into
Sure.
SDRs, which we can talk about a different day.
Right.
But the thing that was weird to me is everybody's just trying to figure it out on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Like every salesperson is sitting there historically in their old cubicle, today in their own homes for the most part, and is trying to figure out how is it that I'm going to um, how is it that I'm going to be able to sell to customers today? How is
Mm-hmm.
it that I'm going to be able to get in touch with this buyer? How am I going to win this deal? Um, and there's just no globally established best practice around any of this. There's no best practice around how pricing should work. There's no best practice around how renewals should work. There's no best practice around how outbound should work. And everyone's just trying to like figure it out themselves. And it's night and day from what you see with many other professions. So if we look outside of our little world of sales and we look out, to let's say design, for example, you
Mm-hmm.
know, there are design systems that are available on the internet that anyone can pick up, and you can really quickly learn how to design stuff without ever having been a designer. And if you're trying to get into design, there's courses out there that you can take, and there's
Right.
certifications that you can do. There's all of this reading material that's out there around it. And and then the actual work, you don't need to start with a blank screen and then figure out how to design. You can just upload different templates, different design
Mm-hmm.
systems, different fonts, different and then you can build on top of that. So it's
Right.
almost like, it's this concept of building blocks, right, that already
Right.
exist,
Right.
so that the foundation's already set for design, and then you're just innovating on top of that. The same is true for code, right? Open source technology exists, and you can download any number of programs that are open source and then start coding on top of them. There's Stack Overflow, which is basically
Mm-hmm.
an open source library of information about how to program, how to
Right.
code. And so if you are, you find yourself with you're trying to. This was something that happened to me personally. I was learning R when I was first getting into product, and
Mm-hmm.
the person who's my co-founder today at Bravado at the time was the chief data scientist of that company. It was just like, oh, just Google it. And I was like, what do you mean by Google it? And because I was like trying to figure out there was some syntax error and I couldn't quite. He's like,
Right.
just Google it. And so I literally like copy pasted the error and I put it into Google, and then boom, there was the answer. It was someone had
Mm-hmm.
already ran into this problem, had already found what the right answer was, and had shared that information. And then a bunch of people had commented on top of, to permutate and iterate off of it. Nothing like that existed for sales. So every salesperson had to figure out how to write their own email. Every salesperson had to figure out how to do their own demo. Every pitch deck was created from scratch. Every comp plan for every company was uniquely formulated. And so Bravado was kind of this mission-driven organization to try to create the first foundational layer of sales so that
Mm-hmm.
every salesperson could then build on top of that. And there was this like open source library of content, comp plans, cold email templates, and knowledge, information of like what was happening across
Mm-hmm.
the 6 million B2B salespeople that exist in the US today. Um, the fact that there are, you call them competitors, I don't see it that way. It's like
Well,
either we all as sales are going to get better, or we're just going to get replaced by automation, right? Like we're already starting to see the movement of product-led growth and this
mm-hmm.
whole transformation of the journey of how people buy software has gotten further and further away from sales. And so it's basically like innovate or die, and I'm on the side of the seller. I spent my whole career in sales. I deeply believe that salespeople um, are are and can be a huge value add to the
Yep.
economy and to the ecosystem, but not if we just keep doing the same crap
Things
over
we're
and
doing
over and
over
over.
again. I agree 1,000% on that. Right. Um, yeah. I mean, you get all the studies. Gartner's come out last year or so saying, yeah, increasing. They're not the only ones saying, hey, buyers don't want to talk to sellers anymore. But to your point, and this point I make is, well, they don't want to talk to sellers who can't help them get their job done. If you can add value to them and help them get their job done in a better way than perhaps they're going to get it done by themselves, then they have time for you.
Yeah. I mean, look, I mean, there's a very simple parallel to this, which is in the world of consulting. Companies will pay six, seven figure sums to Accenture or Bain or BCG or whoever it is in order to hire consultants who will come in and analyze a business problem that they are facing,
Hmm.
which often is a mixture of poor technology as well as poor process.
Right.
And then we'll get recommendations from that consulting party in order to figure out what technology they need to buy in order to modernize their tech, and then what process they need to implement in order to leverage that newfound capacity. And then we'll buy that tech, and then we'll implement that process, and then we'll be super happy, and we'll rinse repeat over and over again. Um, and meanwhile, you have salespeople, which are kind of on the other end of that spectrum, which are all these people who are like emailing buyers. And Accenture and BCG and stuff don't need to do outbound. Customers come to them because they're
Sure.
like, oh, if I have a business problem, I need to go to the expert.
Right.
But then you have a company that's like, hey, I really need to figure out what analytics software to buy. And I could buy Tableau or I could buy Looker. Maybe I need to go with one of these more newfangled solutions like
Hmm.
Pendo or Amplitude or Mixpanel. But the last thing I want to do is talk to a sales rep from one of those companies, right? I'm going to go talk to my peer group. I'm going to go
Hmm.
look on G2. I'm going to, ask my former boss. But the last thing I want to do is talk to a person from one of those companies because I'm going to get put into this like, oh, then I'm going to get qualified and then they're going to try to hard sell me and then I'm going to be on their email list forever. And like, and so like sales has become repulsive, which is really sad for me to see in an industry that I love and think is really valuable and dear. And so I guess the way I look at it is, um, if we can make salespeople view themselves through the same lens that Bain or BCG or Accenture views their consultants, and the way that customers interface with that entity, then I think sales will come a long way from where we are today.
Hmm. I agree. You're gonna have to read my new book.
I'm all here for it. Tell me
It's
more about it.
it's well, I went on to
Tell me
say
more.
here, but
Come.
yeah, called coming out in 2 weeks from the time this day that we're recording this episode, called "Sell Without Selling Out: A Guide
Ooh.
to Success on Your Own Terms." And yeah, it's all premises. How do we create positive buying experiences for the buyers without resorting to the obsolete legacy salesy behaviors that I call selling out, and contrast that with what you need to do to sell in based on like 4 core pillars we call connection, curiosity, understanding, and generosity. So,
I
uh,
feel like here's where I've seen challenges around not what you just described in your book, but just generally trying to get salespeople to view the world differently. Is that people don't innovate until they're forced to. If something works, they just keep doing it because inertia and because
sure.
laziness and because whatever. We've known for a long time that sales has, and I'll tell you like the most simple kind of clear example of this. Um, I keep every company, every SaaS company goes through the same journey where they start to find product market fit. They go raise like a large round of funding from a
Hmm.
VC, a Series B, a Series C, and then that investor comes in and says, "All right, you need to replace your VP of sales, right? We need to get you a real CRO." And
Mm.
so they go in and they say, "Well, you got to get this guy because it's always a guy. You got to get this guy. He's got 25 years of experience. He took this company and Salesforce and whatever, 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 IBM, blah blah blah." um, and and we basically take the same like few hundred people
Cadre of people, yes. It's sort
and
of like
then and
retread baseball managers. But yeah, go
that's right,
ahead.
it's like how many more times can we hire Dusty Baker? It's
Hmm.
like I get it. It's like our version of nobody got fired for buying Amazon or nobody got fired for buying IBM or whatever
Right,
it is.
right.
It's rinse and repeating the same playbook without ever recognizing that the people who made successful teams in that era were doing it when the sales process looked nothing like what it does today. And so as soon as you bring in that person, they basically implement a bunch of practices that are completely anathema to the modern buying practice. But because that's the way that they've done it for 25 years, that's just what they know what to do. But nobody ever wakes up and says, well, why don't I take the salesperson who's absolutely crushing it in today's modern buying context and give that person the power to make decisions at an organizational level so that they can build us what a modern buyer would want to experience. But nobody wants to do that because, well, we just raised a large round of funding and, now our investors are telling us. So I feel like there's a lot of that I see in this.
Sure. Yeah, but I wonder, is it even among what you're calling sort of the cadre of modern sellers, is how would you, look at your report, the sales compensation report. So you just published your 2022 Bravado State of Sales Compensation Guide, and the figures you have about quota attainment and from which you can intuit something about or infer something about sales performance itself is kind of dismal. So what's the definition of crushing it?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that because I think first I'll give you the stat just so that we have context around it. So fewer than 45% of salespeople hit quota in 2022 or 2021. I'm sorry. So in 2021, we surveyed 110,000 salespeople. And we have a product on Bravado called the Portfolio, where salespeople basically track their career. Think of it like Mint.com, but for sales. And so they track every quarter what their quota was, what their attainment to quota was, what deals they closed, what their ranking was on the sales team, what percentage of their sales team hit quota, et cetera. So we basically have this like data repository to survey across the landscape of what's happening at 13,000 different sales teams in the United States, globally actually, but the plurality of which is in North America.
Right.
And then that's all sliced into SMB, mid-market, enterprise, Series A, Series B, Series D, public, et cetera, size of team, quota amount, whatnot. But the overall statistic, which I think is in some ways the most sad, and depending on how you look at it, is that 47% of sales teams hit their team quota in 2021, which means more than 50% of sales teams actually missed their quota in 2021, which was, of course, kind of a bumper year in terms of, the economy and this and that.
Yeah.
And then we have a stat internally at Bravado that we like to call kind of best-in-class sales team. So best-in-class sales team is one in which 75% of the team hits quota. 75% of the team. We're not talking 100% of the team or 90%, 75% of the team hits quota. And across all companies, 23% of sales teams hit this number. Here's what's really kind of concerning around that is that actually 26% of teams that were above 100 sales team members, so basically that's kind of like large scale, like you're kind of like Series E plus, publicly traded companies. So 26% of those hit quota. But if you happen to work at a Series B to a Series D company, which is, kind of in that 20 to 75 reps on the team, kind of scaling, going 15%. And so you're basically saying that, your odds of being on a team like that is just so low. 54% of sales reps missed quota in 2021.
Right.
And the average tenure for an account executive dropped to 11 months. And the average tenure for a VP of sales dropped to 17 months. And so, like, to your point of painting a dismal picture, it is just that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say.
I was going to say, like, so why does this happen? Like, how come you have record high stock market? How come you have companies raising funding like never before, and yet salespeople are still not hitting quota? They're still getting fired all the time. Why? How come there's such a dichotomy between public company performance and private company performance and whatnot? And I think it actually comes down to something really simple, which is founders and CEOs need to show extremely aggressive growth goals in order to raise venture funding. So to get capital from a VC, you need to show that your business can scale at an exponential rate. And most businesses cannot scale
Yeah,
at an
sure.
exponential rate.
Right.
And the reason they cannot is because either the market is too competitive, there's downward pressure on pricing, the product that they themselves have is not good enough to be able to dominate a market, they don't have the distribution leverage. I mean, there's many reasons why it can happen, but suffice it to say that let's say that you hit $5 million in ARR this year, and your VP of sales comes to you and says, you know what, if we hire more people and we do this, we release this product, blah, 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 I think we can get to 12 million by the end of the year. So we're going to grow 225% year over year. And then they take that plan to the board, and the board says, no way. Like our companies, like our best companies are going from 5 to 50. And then the conversation's like, well, what's stopping you from getting to 50? And like, what would we need to do? And then the CEO's like, I don't know we can get there. And then they're like, well, are you sure you're the right CEO for the company then? Because other companies are able to get there. And so there's all this pressure that gets lopped on the founder to basically go into a spreadsheet and take the numbers and dial up a few extra zeros at the end of some stuff, and then come back and say, oh, here's our plan for how we're going to get from 5 to 30, let's say. When the plan originally was 5 to 12. And then the VC says, great, if you're going to be able to go from 5 to 30, then you should be able to go raise at a 300 million valuation, because that's explosive growth. Now the founder's really fired up and excited, and so they go truck off to go talk to some VCs, and guess what? Those VCs turn around and fund them, and then now all of a sudden they've raised a $300 million round, and so then comes the reality. Right, so as we like to say, at some time the crows come home to roost. Right, so
And a
they
group
raise this big round.
of crows is called, right?
Tell me.
A group of crows is called a murder.
Wow,
So it's appropriate.
that is some good trivia on a Tuesday. That's for sure. I did not know that, but that's really good.
Yeah. Well, you can expand your example the next time. Well, I mean, but I think that if we really get down to the root of the problem, is that, yeah, the scenarios you're describing is all based on sort of one sort of oversight, which is that the level of performance of the individual seller is just not that good. And oftentimes, especially if you measure by fundamentally, let's say, a win rate, is that they're put into a position based on all these assumptions that need to be made that make it almost, I believe, I was going to say impossible, not impossible, but impossible for many of them, obviously based on these numbers, to effectively sell and achieve their quota.
Yeah, just finishing that thread, because that comes right back to what you're saying, which is now you were supposed to go from 5 to 12, but now suddenly you've raised a bunch of money on the assumption you're going to go from 5 to 30. And so then what happens? The VP of sales basically starts getting pulled into weekly and monthly and quarterly meetings where they're being asked, all right, where's the 30? Where's the 30? Where's the 30? The VP of sales then turns around and goes to their sales managers and says, all right, where's the 30? Where's the 30? Where's the 30? The sales managers then turn around and go to the reps and say, all right, where's the 30? Where's the 30? Where's the 30? And then the reps go to the customers. And then they try to force deals through that are not a good fit. They try to discount their way in. They try to, take a bunch of tactics in order to try to make revenue happen, because they know that they're going to get fired if they miss this number.
Right. So they do the slash burn strategy through their prospect base. They end up with win rates in the low 20%, and it's impossible for most companies to be able to scale when their individual sellers are so ineffective.
That's right. And so the efficacy of the individual seller is completely thrown out the window. It's not even considered in the possibility of something that the VP of sales or the CEO even thinks about, because they're just thinking about it from like numbers on a spreadsheet. And I feel like this is one of the biggest misses that we have as a industry, as tech as a whole, which is that, like, sales is a human. There's this debate: sales science or art. I am on the camp of sales being an art. I don't believe it's. I think there is science to it for sure. It's science enabled, but ultimately, it's getting one person, human, belly to belly, having a relationship, having a conversation.
Yep.
In order to do that effectively, you need to be really good. You just have to be real. You got to know your product. You got to know your space. You got to know your buyer. You got to be super well trained, and like there's all this, but nobody's putting in that work, right? Nobody's putting in the work to get people there. Instead, people get a higher quota, higher base, higher OTE without the tools and structure to actually achieve those goals,
Hmm.
and then we end up quickly firing the people that can't get there, and it just becomes a churn and burn industry.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, think about it. I mean, we sort of force people into these behaviors because, as you talked about before, is hey, we've got 5x pipeline coverage requirements. So yeah, that's sort of the rule of thumb is that your win rate's going to be the reciprocal of your pipeline coverage ratio. And you hear you hear sales leaders saying, "Oh, we're going to do 7x pipeline coverage or 9. I've done one this year, earlier this year, or not this year. I guess it was last year. It's 9x." And it's like, how do you expect people to effectively build the relationship they need to build with the customer, to truly understand what's important to that buyer, if they have that type of expectation put on them?
That's right. I mean, I'll give you one very specific example on this. There's a company that shall not go named,
Yeah.
um, that the CEO of which pinged me and basically said, "Hey, Sahil, really great news. We just raised a fresh round of funding, and we're gonna scale aggressively into what was at that time last year. So it was just like September, October of last year. So we're gonna scale
Right.
aggressively." Okay, great. Congratulations, awesome. Obviously, can you help us with some sales hiring? I was like, sure. What are you looking for?
Mhm.
Person's like, I don't care about the compensation. I just need the best salespeople. And I was like, okay, well, what do you mean by best salespeople? I need people who can crush quota, who can close deals, who can just make shit happen. Like I need like hunters, people who I can put big targets in front. And so I'm listening to the description of what this mythical creature looks
Right.
like. And I'm like, and I said back to him, I was like, you have no idea what your sales process actually looks like, do you? He's like, no, of course, I've been, and then the CEO was like, no, I've been personally closing all these deals and da 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 da. I'm like, how have you been closing these deals? And he goes, oh, well, I've been cold email. So he went to Stanford. He goes, I've been cold emailing other people who went to Stanford and basically asking them to sign up for, give me feedback on my product. And then when they get on the phone with me, I close them. And I was like, okay, so what do you want this person to do? Do you want them to email, the Arizona State alumni and try to get them to close people? Like, what is your actual sales motion process?
Mhm.
Whatever. Doesn't have one, right?
Right.
And so this sort of behavior, that was an extreme example, but is microcosmic of the sort of thing we see, which is that companies are not investing in thinking about what is my total addressable market, and then how am I going to reach these people, and where these people live, and how much time does it take, what's my cost of acquisition, what, like, they're not doing that math. They're just doing the math of like, hey, we closed $1 million this year, next year we're going to close 10. Like,
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well,
It's
so
unbelievable.
it brings up a question though, is because you referred to this earlier, and I've been asking more guests about this question. Is so if you're in a situation, that's of one of these companies that represented in the numbers you hear is only 1 in 4 have 75% of the members of the team, only 54% of reps, or 54% of reps miss quota, low win rates. In that environment, if your individual reps, let's say, have their win rates like set in the low 20%, can you really say you have product market fit?
Huh. That's a great question,
And
man.
I would
That
say
is
I
such.
would say no, because unless your sellers can go out and in the majority of cases, the individual sellers, unless in the majority of cases they can go out and present a compelling vision to the buyer that that inspires the buyer to want to do business with you, it's arguably you don't have product market fit.
I don't think it's arguable.
Well,
I don't know
yeah,
what the argument would be.
fine.
The vast majority. I would take that one step further. I think
Sure.
most companies will never have product market fit. And so like this to me is like one of the most. I say funny even though it's not funny, but it's like
Telling.
every company out there when they're recruiting salespeople will turn around and make it sound so easy. make it sound so easy. They'll be like,
Sure.
oh my gosh, customers are lining up at the door and this and that and
Sales
whatever.
job. Yes.
Yes, it's amazing. You're just gonna come here and like you're just gonna like take orders. And then people show up and they realize what it's really like. And so one of the different things, and I don't mean to plug what we do at Bravado, but this problem is something I'm acutely aware of. So one of the things that we did at Bravado that was very different with our jobs marketplace, as I mentioned to you before,
Hmm.
we launched a jobs marketplace
Right.
where we're matching top salespeople with great companies. It's the great companies part that is really unique. So we as an organization vet every employer before we let them onto the platform. And as far as I know, it could be that there's others doing it. I think we are the only platform where the employer goes through a vetting process prior to being allowed to recruit from a network or from a
So what's
platform.
that look like? What's that process? What are you vetting?
Yeah, so it's four things. So one of the advantages of sitting on a fairly large community of sales reps is I can find people who actually work at your company. So if the VP of sales inbounds and says, "Hey, I want to hire sales reps from Bravado," uh, between myself and Ross, we usually know someone at the company who works there, and we can back channel and we'll be like, "Hey, what's it really like to work at your company? Like, are you
Hmm.
happy? Or are people happy? Like, what's the skinny? What's the dirt?" And so we get bottom, like kind of on the ground level information from the troops as to what the battlefield really looks like. Then we turn around and start doing our diligence. And so diligence is kind of a three-step process. The first thing we do is we vet the company culture. And the way we do that is oftentimes I will have a conversation with the CEO of the company to be like, how do you view sales? Tell me about how you've historically done sales. Tell me about what your future plans of sales look like. Here are some of the common things I see where sales goes wrong at companies. How do you think about it? And I try to figure out if the founder truly has an appreciation for what to me is an obvious truth, which is that sales is the most difficult job at the company and should be given every benefit of the doubt because no one else can do it but salespeople. And
Hmm.
if the founder has a deep earnest respect for the craft of sales versus seeing it as this like necessary evil that they need to do because they really just want to build product and like do great things, and salespeople are just annoying and coin operated and all these other things. So then
Right.
that's the first filter. The second filter is I talk to their VCs. So I actually have a conversation with the VC themselves. Now the advantage is that my wife's a VC and I
Hmm.
do a lot of angel investing, so I have a little bit of a perspective of what the other side of the table looks like. Typically have a good sense of everything from tell me about your investment thesis on this company, how do you see them stacking up against competitors, how do you see their growth rates, and so we're having conversations with the VC to understand, is this truly the kind of company that has the potential to have product market fit, or is this a company that's just going to be languishing with everyone else? And then the last step, which is arguably the most important, is we have them open up Salesforce. So we literally have the VP of sales open up Salesforce, and I ask them, I want to see what your attainment to quota looks like across the team. I want to see, what is your distribution of how much reps made each, in the last quarter, in the last year. What percentage of your revenue is diversified across the team versus being concentrated in one or two, like kind of reps who are
Right.
outliers.
Right.
Um, and we basically make sure the end goal of this is I want to be able to refer someone from our network as if you were a friend of mine and I was sending you to a company as a personal endorsement.
Sure.
And so that's the mantra behind how we built the jobs product. And so every employer that comes in goes through this vetting process, and then at the end of which we basically have kind of hand curated a list of companies that we feel like there's no guarantees in sales or in life
Mhm.
that have a better than average odds of you being able to find a place to work where you can be successful.
Right. So, question, and not meant as a gotcha question, but
No, no,
have you
please.
have you run the rule over these companies you vetted? Are their outcomes and their numbers any different than the averages what you're finding in your report?
Yeah, that's a great, such a. Unfortunately, you asked not the gotcha question, but like the perfect sales teaser question. Yeah, the average attainment to quota at the companies that we work for is 88% of sales reps hit quota at the companies that we are at. and 100% of sales teams hit quota. So we actually don't take any clients where they did not hit quota in the previous year. So which does mean that we turn away a lot of business. To be super
Hmm.
clear, it's not the most profitable decision. There's a lot of companies out there
Well,
that are struggling with hiring salespeople that would probably pay more for our service because they would need it. But I can't in good faith send someone to a company where I don't think that they would be successful.
right.
So the outcomes are vastly better, but there are far fewer employers, which means there's far fewer opportunities, and it means that a majority of our membership, unfortunately, I can't service and I can't help, and it's like the bottleneck for me.
Yeah. Well, but what you're modeling, it sounds like, is the behavior that sellers should be modeling relative to qualifying opportunities. And
Uh,
they
when
run
I
into
was
this
24,
pressure.
my friend, I was really bad at picking companies. When I was 26, I was really bad at picking
Sure.
companies. Even at 34, I don't know how good I am, but I think I'm better than most. And
Well, but you've
and
got a
I think
process for
that's
doing it, and you stick to the process, which is, a function of leadership and helping people do that.
try my best, my friend.
Yeah.
It really. I mean, my advice to any salesperson, um, if you're looking for a new job, have have three reference points. Talk to back channel into a rep who works at the company.
Hmm. Easy
Talk
enough to find.
to talk to the CEO of the company and ask how they view sales, and talk to one customer and ask them why they bought the product, what their experience has been like. And if a company cannot provide you with a rep, the CEO, and a customer reference, then look elsewhere because there's something weird. Because any company that's good should be able to provide you those three things.
Yeah. Ideally, they should provide you a customer who didn't buy from you. Um, yeah,
That's fair. That's a great call out, but I think in the interest of efficacy and whatnot, I think they
I know
could
they'd
probably
be
get there. But
reluctant to do that, but that if you really wanted to find out what's going on, that'd be the one to talk to. And it's not always negative. Sometimes just isn't the right product market fit.
sure.
but but if you're trying to get a sense of what the buyer's experience was with the sellers from that company, that'd be interesting to talk to those people. Let's talk about the job tenure declining because you mentioned about AEs in
Mhm.
2021 dropped from 12 months to 11 months. VP of sales, we'll come back to VP of sales. Let's start with the AE. So how much of this is sort of a one-time thing, sort of the pandemic-induced Great Resignation, or is it, tied to other causes?
Uh, I mean, like with everything in life, there's a confluence of factors. But I don't think that the trend is going to reverse in the other direction. In fact, I think it's likely that we're going to continue to see the rise of the outsourced sales professional.
Hmm.
Um, we're starting to already see the B2B influencer model take root where, uh, you know, people who have large audiences in sales are told, hey, if you'll promote this product, I'll pay you in order to do so.
Hmm.
That's only one step. That's B2B advertising, B2B marketing. We're
Sure.
only one step away from B2B sales being outsourced, where it's like, hey, I'm somebody who has an existing book of business and relationships with this set of buyers, and instead of being trapped at one company selling one product that may or may not be a good fit for these people to have a relationship with, I'm going to be an outsourced salesperson, and I'll continue to sell to an existing group of customers a wide suite of products, which of course happens in channel sales and a bunch of other
Hmm.
mediums, but doesn't really happen in as much in like common SaaS mid market enterprise sales. Less common, I would say, um, and
So is that
and then on
good or
top of that,
good or bad in your mind?
oh, I think good for sure. I'm
Good for the sellers, I think.
I think, well, and for the buyers, because I don't think they want to spend their time with people who don't know their business.
Hmm.
I think the comfort of, hey, I know Andy. Andy's my friend. I've worked with him for a number of years. He knows what I like to buy. He knows what our process looks like internally. The familiarity, the value of relationships has always been underutilized, but I think
Hmm.
the utility is rising as we continue to grow root to new business models. Um,
So
but
top
one
top
thing,
reps selling to no business, no company have a portfolio of products they're going to represent instead of just one.
that's right.
Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
I think the job I've mentioned this before. I think the great job in the future is to be the talent agent for sellers in that environment?
I think it's inevitable. It is
Yeah,
inevitable. Now there are a bunch of reasons why it doesn't happen, faster, and a
sure.
lot of it has to do with the way that America as a whole is set up, with benefits being tied to full-time
Full-time employment,
employment and
right?
whatnot. So there's a lot of taxes being much harder as a 1090. There's a lot of reasons why it doesn't happen as quickly as it should, but I think it will continue to happen. But back to your question, which was the tenure of the AE. The other thing that I'm seeing is with inflated quotas and unrealistic expectations comes a shorter leash, because you have money
Sure.
you have money, and you need to convert money into performance. What you don't have is time.
Yep.
And so, in a world in which time is the scarce resource versus money is the thing you can throw around, you can always just pay up in order to hire someone else. And so, at that point, there is no ceiling to how many reps you can hire or how expensive you can get on terms of OTE. All you need is for them to perform. And so then that's where you get into a world where, like, there was a friend of mine took a job as the first sales hire for a company that had just raised its Series A, and was let go within 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had a conversation with him as to what happened, he basically said, "Well, I got there. They told me, like, hey, no pressure. Like, we want you to ramp. We want you to take your time, etc." Okay, cool. And then 3 weeks later, the CEO was like, "All right, well, why haven't we made any progress yet on these deals? Like, where's the pipeline?" And then he spent like 4 weeks prospecting as the first head of sales, prospecting into the target accounts. And then on the eighth week was told, "Well, you haven't closed any business in 7 weeks, so we're going to let you go." And and mind you, this is a company that
So insane.
had two customers ever before
Right.
he started. And so you see a lot
Well,
of
but
that.
should he have known better, or did they just mislead him when he was interviewing?
No, I think no, I just don't think that people understand. The CEO just didn't understand sales. The CEO was like, "Oh,
Clearly
we're
didn't
gonna
make any progress in developing his understanding either.
yeah, right." And
Yeah.
therein lies the issue. Is just like there's a lot of that. There's a lot of ignorance about how sales works, which is what is leading to the shortened tenures, and it's having real long-term consequences on
Yeah.
people's employment, because the other side of this coin with shortened tenures is the fact that the way that our recruiting product works, which is somewhat unique, is it's built kind of like Tinder, where
Mhm.
you get like flashcards per rep with a bunch of information, and you swipe left, swipe right. And if you decline, we have a little pop-up that shows up, which optionally asks you to cite why it was that you
Mhm.
declined this candidate. Do you know what the number one reason that a candidate gets declined is? What would you guess?
Did they have visibility?
42%. 42% of all declines, because we have a matching algorithm that's sitting on top of this. So it's not
Because
like
they
I'm just
didn't have
sending random people.
direct industry experience?
Mm-mm. That's filtered by the algorithm. The number one reason, 42% of all rejects. The next highest is like 18%, just to be clear. It's a long
Mm.
list. 42% too hoppy.
Again, yeah, yeah. The reason I'm laughing is like, okay, well, that's the environment you're creating as a CEO, and then you're gonna penalize people for that? Yeah,
There's the double-edged sword.
yeah.
This is the thing that people aren't realizing, is that you're hiring someone, you're setting unrealistic expectations, you're pressurizing, they're not performing. Okay, so you let them go, and then their LinkedIn resume shows that there was a company that we were working with on Bravado Talent, again, that will go unnamed, where we had to sever. I've had to fire two clients
Mm.
for the product. So far, we have yet to be fired, which is nice, but we've had to fire two. And this one was the worst of the two, just to be clear.
Right.
Um, there was a client who basically, told me they just raised this monster Series B, and they were scaling and raising. I talked to their investor, great, like everything seemed awesome. Product was really good. I really liked the product too. Um, got on board with the CRO and then the CEO of the company to do an onboarding call after they signed the contract. First time I'd met the CRO. So far, I'd only dealt with the CEO. So I'm talking to the CRO, And the CRO says, I have a real bent for people who stick with one company for a long time. And I said,
Hmm.
okay, that makes sense. Yeah, he's like, we're building a business that spans over the course of many years, and we want to build a generational business here. And so I don't want people who are just going to hop from job to job. Just for a little bit higher OTE, I want people who are really invested in making a long-term commitment to this company, which doesn't sound unrealistic, or unfair.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, so what does that mean to you? And he said, well, basically, if they've been at their last company for less than 5 years, I don't want to talk to them.
Okay.
And I was like,
How many of those
okay.
are there out there?
Right. So I was like, so you want me to pull from the 17 salespeople that have worked for the same company for the
Right.
last 5 years? Like, and then I try to get into the why, because I'm always, as
Sure.
we know in sales, it's the interesting part is the thought process behind it. And I was like,
Right.
well, what does that give you? And they're like, well, if they've been at the same company for the last 5 years, it means that they must be really good. And it means that they must have gotten promoted a bunch. And it means that they must be reliably hitting quota and da 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 da. And I was like, yeah, but what about all of the companies that haven't been able to afford that kind of luxury to an employee because they went out of business in 2 years or they had to do layoffs or whatever? Like, what if it had nothing to do with the performance of the salesperson, it had everything to do with the company? And the person said something to me that again, this was the first flag of what turned out to be a 3-week partnership.
Yeah.
He said, well, then they should have known better and known how to pick the right company. So that probably makes me question their judgment more than anything else.
Yeah. As if all that is visible to them when they're making.
As if like everyone's got a freaking crystal ball
Oh,
sitting
right.
around knowing
Yeah.
as if everyone is a master at assessing, and valuing companies. So like this is the market we're in. Where on the
Yeah.
one hand we have like groups of companies. I want to use one example that I can publicly use because I was told I could say this publicly. One company we work with is called Webflow. I love
Hmm.
Webflow. Their team is amazing. Maggie, who runs their sales department, is someone I have a lot of respect for, and she's a rock star. You know, I have her who's like a champion of diversity, who's trying to bring people in
Hmm.
who come from all kinds of walks of life,
Right.
understands that like, sales shouldn't be just like a bunch of white dudes running around
Right.
and is building this like incredibly diverse but powerful team where 100% of their sales reps hit quota last quarter. A
Hmm.
100% of their reps hit quota last quarter. And their team is a mishmash of people from all different geographies, from all
Yep.
different backgrounds, all different. Like you took a team picture and I sent it to you, you would have no clue this was a sales team, and it was not like. And then and then on the other side of that, I've got this shit that I'm dealing with
Right.
people who are like, if someone's got less than 5 years of experience or they haven't worked at one of these like 5 companies, and I don't even want to look at them. Like, it's just unbelievable
Yeah.
like how bad companies are at hiring salespeople. It just blows my mind.
Yeah. Well, and so we could go on for another 2 hours on this. Is Yeah, just a simple thing. Question I ask a CRO I was having this conversation with, and a hiring manager was asked them what they were looking for with sellers, and they go same list that you talked about for you, hunter, blah 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 blah. And I said, well, okay, have you ever asked your buyers what they need from your sellers? Big silence. It's like, you're hiring for this image, what you have as what a sales team needs to be. Have you ever asked your customers what they need from you in order to make a decision to buy from you? No.
And what I find to be the most interesting part of that, because the answer is always no,
It's always no. Yeah, I know.
is
That's why
because the CRO or VP of sales thinks they know better than the customer.
exactly. And
That's what I find to be. It's not the fact that they haven't, because
yeah,
we both know we haven't. It's because they're like, well, they don't. I mean, it's my job to know how they. As if like again, it's the hubris of it. Again, this is like a really interesting analog. We have an advisor at Bravado. Her name is Fern Mandelbaum. So I love Fern. She teaches the sales course at Stanford GSB.
hmm
She also teaches the she huge advocate for diversity and women's
hmm
empowerment and entrepreneurship and stuff. She's amazing, amazing woman. And I don't recall if she gave me permission to share the company, so I'll just keep it. A very very large company that every salesperson has heard of
right.
hired her because they were having trouble they were having trouble, scaling their revenue team and their revenue operations and stuff. And so basically was hired by the CEO, who's a huge public figure that everybody on this thing knows, to come in and do an assessment. So she basically went in and she walked through the sales pit, as it was
Right.
known then, and whatever, and then spent a day with the team, did interviews, whatever. And at the end of the day, the CEO, the VP of sales or CR or whatever it was, sat down with her in a room and said, "All right, what would be your recommendation?" And she said to them, the industry that you sell into, to avoid trying to
Right.
say which company,
Yeah.
I'll just won't put it into. The industry you sell into is, your buyers. She goes, 70% of them are women, and 40% are minorities. But your entire sales team is white dudes.
White dudes,
Like,
right? White bros, right?
like, how come your sales team doesn't look like your customer set? And they were obviously like hugely embarrassed by this thought and whatnot, and it led to to the credit of this company, they made some massive changes to the way they were
Oh, good.
hiring and whatnot. And this is a story from roughly, I think, like 8-10 years ago. But the point of the story still remains the same, which is, like, how is it possible that you are selling into an industry that is dominated by women and minority buyers, but yet you have hired a bunch of people that don't look anything like that in order to sell? So like, it's just, there's a lot of misalignment between
Yep.
what a customer wants from a sales rep and what a VP of sales wants from a sales rep.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're gonna have to cut it off there because otherwise we're gonna we're gonna go on forever. But gotta have you back sooner than 15 months, and we'll keep this conversation going. So, yeah, thanks for joining me. So, if people want to learn more about your sales comp report or just Bravado in general, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, bravado.co. It's free. Every resource on the site. We have a bunch of stuff that hopefully can help salespeople do their jobs better, be more successful in their careers. So if you're in B2B sales and looking, that's great. And by the way, if for whatever reason you're happy with a different community that you're a part of, or you're finding value elsewhere, don't think that this is a plug for Bravado. But if for some reason you are not part of a community, which I
Yeah.
think is true of many salespeople,
Oh yeah.
you can check ours out. You can also check out Rev Genius. I love what Jared and their team are building. You can check out Pavilion. I love what Sam and their team. There's a bunch of this, Max and Sales Hacker. You
Yep.
don't need to stick with Bravado. Go find another group of salespeople so that you don't need to stare at yourself and think you're crazy. You're not the crazy one. There's a lot of fucked up shit that's happening to salespeople, and the only way you're ever gonna like recognize that is if you find a community of peers where you can have these conversations and learn. So again, whether it's Bravado or not, I hope it is, but if it's not, that's fine. Don't think you're crazy. Don't think,
Right.
oh, this is
Yeah,
just the way it has to be, because I
Right.
can't tell you
Doesn't need
how
to be.
many conversations I have where people were like, oh, I thought it was me all along, and it's not you
It's
all
not you.
along.
Exactly. All right, Sahil, thank you so much.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank my guest, Sahil Mansuri, for sharing his insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So thank you for your help with that. And thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.